Ladies and gents, let's turn global once again. India, the world's biggest economy, just finished voting in a marathon election, actually lasted 6 weeks. Modi is the winner once again, though his party, the BJP party, obviously lost the majority here, so they're going to have to build a coalition. But India increasingly comes to mind when we ask the question, which societies will win the 21st century? Our next speaker will be delving into that question. He wears a lot of hats. He is the founder of the company AlphaGo. He is also an Indian-American political scientist, advisor to the US government and the UN. And you know what? His German is perfect, actually. He even understands Swiss German, but we decided we'll do the presentation in English, and then we'll do some Q&A in German later on. Parag Khanna.
Guten Tag eigentlich. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm so delighted to be back here. And ladies and gentlemen, you've chosen a very, very good theme, for better or worse, for this gathering. That the going is getting tough, and it's only going to get tougher. Is where I unfortunately need to begin as a point of departure. What do I mean by that? Well, things are getting so complex in the world today that we keep on having to come up with new terms for it. For example, perma-crisis. I should have put it in quotes. You've heard it so many times. Or, if you don't like all of this new jargon, you could just take that new Hollywood movie, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. If you haven't seen it, it is very confusing. And that's generally how we think about the world today. Complicated, confusing. What it actually is complex. Complexity is actually a scientific term, even a mathematical term. When you apply it to the real world, though, what it boils down to is this. The past is no longer a good guide to the future. Tomorrow will not look like yesterday. There are things unfolding, new patterns, new developments that we have not seen before. And you have to try to anticipate what they are going to be if you're going to be successful in business, in governance, and in other spheres of life. These are just a few examples of the interrelated drivers that are making the world more and more complex. When you are a decision maker, you have to take into account economic risks, geopolitical factors, social, technological, environmental, not in neat and simple silos, but literally all at the same time. If we were having this conversation 15 or 20 years ago, we might not have noticed that because of climate change, Russia and Ukraine are becoming ever larger suppliers of global wheat, and therefore we had not predicted or known that when Russia invades Ukraine, that's going to have a huge impact on the distribution of grain around the world. That's going to raise prices for very vulnerable countries and plunge them into social disarray. Look at those chain reactions between climate change and geopolitics and political stability. That kind of thing is happening all the time. It's not very difficult to retroactively piece together the story, but how about foresight to anticipate what may happen? Who's paying attention to or anticipating and making a plan for how we will respond to the impact, of course, of rising interest rates, rising debt levels, the fiscal stress that has, the impact on public expenditure, what that does for intergenerational divides, social and political polarization, and so on. Well, actually, you were having that conversation here this morning, which makes you a country which, not surprisingly, is ahead of the curve more than others, but you still struggle with it, and you're not sure if your answer is the correct one. This is not going to change. We are not going to untangle this complexity. We can try, but I think it's more likely and more useful right now to try to anticipate. So what I want to do today is talk through some geopolitical, climate, demographic trends and piece together where I think things are going despite all the complexity, and hopefully that can guide you in the future. Let's start with geopolitics. Isn't it so easy to say that the future geopolitical order is either a historical sequence from Pax Britannica to Pax Americana to Pax Sinica? The world system needs a number one. Who will it be? Who will be the hegemon? And someone can stand here and tell you that that's the way it's going to be. Or someone will say, it's a new Cold War, a G2. We're coming out of an era of bipolar rivalry. We're entering a new era of bipolar rivalry, and that's just the way it's going to be. Doesn't sound very complex to me. Sounds like a terrible oversimplification. And as we know, such simplifications are just neat and wrong, right? How about this instead? Let's challenge our minds. Let's look at the world as it really is, how things are actually operating. What it looks like is what I call a geopolitical marketplace. A world order in which there is not one power at the center. You may want there to be one, you may not, but there isn't going to be anyway. How about a world where instead of a strict hierarchy, every region actually matters? Every region, continent is negotiating with all others at the same time. No one superpower sits at the center and says, you cannot do this, you cannot do this. Where Latin America and Africa and Europe and North America and South Asia and East Asia are all competing in this marketplace to be trusted, to be a provider of resources, of utilities, and where countries that are not the great powers are saying, I'm not going to choose sides. It's so easy to say, well, the world will be divided in two, pick red or pick blue. That's not what I see happening. I see 150 countries saying, I'm not going to pick red. I'm not going to pick blue. What are you going to do for me? I'm a consumer in this marketplace of geopolitics. Who's going to build my telecom infrastructure? Who's going to launch my satellites? Who's going to build my railway systems? Who am I going to do pharmaceutical deals with and buy medical equipment from? Who am I going to get electric vehicles from? Who am I going to sell commodities to? Who am I going to buy weapons from? That's the real world, a very competitive marketplace, right? Not a neat, simple dichotomy. So multi-alignment rather than pure alignment. Again, a hyper-complex geopolitical reality, something that is definitely non-linear and something that cannot be reduced to a previous role model or template that is simple. Now, some of our talk about global order and the global future is often done without taking into account two of the biggest, most seismic changes underway in the world today. Those are, again, demographics and climate. Let me bring those together. What is this map behind me? Well, this is a map of human geography. Every human being in the world is a little pixel on this map, 8 billion. I haven't left any of you out, you're all here. We are all here right now. As you can see, most of the human population is Asians in Asia. But what's interesting about this is that it takes everything as the landscape, the distribution of people as steady, as given. Right? But it's anything but, isn't it? And what happens when you bring in climate change? Now look closely at what's happening in the world today. This is called the suitability index, where you organize the color scheme according to the change in the habitability, suitability for human life in different regions of the world. So you superimpose this over the previous one, and you get a fairly devastating picture. As temperatures rise towards 2 degrees Celsius above the industrial baseline, and perhaps even higher, unfortunately, you get a situation where so much of the world population that I showed you earlier is in regions that are hyper-stressed. We haven't been factoring that in. Macroeconomic forecasts of the GDP of countries takes into account mostly very linear productivity-related metrics and investment levels and trade and so forth, without factoring in some of these complex dynamics around climate. And I want to direct your attention to one region in particular, India, South Asia, a region that we decided to spotlight a bit today, and not accidentally, given the fact that they've just had an election, and Prime Minister Modi has secured his third term, not with the margin that he would have expected. Now, as investors, we look to India. We want to see an alternative to China. We want to see the next China. It has the same larger population now than China. But when China was growing in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, did it face this situation? Just the other day, it hit 53 degrees Celsius in India, right? That was in late May. And every year, new heat wave records are being broken. So now let's put all these layers of maps together. You have the most populous region of the entire planet Earth, right? Just take Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. That's about 1.8 billion people, triple the population of Europe, right? You have the youngest population in the world. You have the most climate-stressed region of the world. Is it going to be simply a matter of, oh yes, let's just, do more call centers and IT in India and it'll be the next China? Well, no, they're facing headwinds and the world is being exposed to new structural challenges like climate that we have not faced before, so you cannot make linear calculations. In fact, one of the things that's going to happen, as I'll show you in a moment, is probably an ever more significant outflow of the South Asian and Southeast Asian population out of the region given climate stress. So where you see an economic winner, climate says this place could be a loser. What's going to be the resolution? And the answer is patterns that we haven't seen before. Now, I put climate and demographics together. Let me do that some more here. We are reaching this moment that some call peak humanity, the maximum number of people that will ever simultaneously live in the world. And that number is far less than the 15 billion that were predicted in the 1990s and 2000s by demographic forecasters. Instead, that peak humanity moment is coming in the next 10 to 15 years, which is the blink of an eye in demographic time. And it's going to be less than 10 billion and much sooner than we predicted, and it's also then going to decline very rapidly. Now, I can state these facts, but no one can prepare us for them. No one alive today, no one in this room, you have never spoken to a parent, a grandparent, who can remember what the world was like when the population was not in the midst of quadrupling from 1920 to 2020, from 2 billion people to 8 billion people. Only the people here, alive today, we are going to be the ones to experience this, and we have no playbook for a world where we reach a peak human population and then it begins to decline. Where will it be inflationary? Where will it be deflationary? What's it going to mean combined with climate change? What is it going to mean for migration and governance? No playbook. There is no United Nations or World Bank paper, right, on how to handle this situation. And we're entering it now. And even this is fairly linear because it's not taking into account what might happen, of course, with another pandemic or a climate catastrophe or a major world war. Things could decline even further. And if you look generationally, it's also uncharted territory because now the majority of the world population is young, even as we have higher life expectancy, but millennials and Gen Z and Gen Alpha are the largest generations ever, but they're also going to be the last big generations ever. What I'm showing you here is that Generation Alpha, today's babies, still being born, when that generation is complete, it will be smaller than Gen Z. So the decline has already begun. And our children are not having children. And because that's happening, as young get older, they still remain the largest share of the world population because there are fewer and fewer young people. Again, never happened before in history. So you're in a situation where the present youth are also the future. How do we prepare for that? What does that mean for labor markets? What does that mean, of course, for fiscal and systems and governance? And let's bring it back to the demographic map globally. The majority of those people are Asians in Asia, but are they going to stay there? Well, not necessarily. Here I'm going to show you a sequence. We have the largest share of the world's youth population in Asia. Just the number of working age millennials in Asia is larger than every other region in the world combined. So put it all together. You have your geopolitical fragmentation, you have your peak demographics, you have climate stress. We are not going to treat these in isolation. Instead, we're going to ask, what are the consequences of this? Well, the consequences in all likelihood are very large-scale migrations, right? But also at the same time, given our labor shortages in northern economies, a war for talent to recruit the right ones that are going to be our fiscal base, our taxpayers, our entrepreneurs, our caregivers, our teachers, and so forth in the future. And the world will be divided into those countries that are ready to absorb those populations productively and harness them, and those countries that are not. All the complexity in the world can maybe even be boiled down to this. If a country is attracting young talent, it has a future. Young people will come, assimilate, integrate, figure it out, work on solutions. They'll be stakeholders in your society. If your country is losing young people, there's no other young people coming because fertility has collapsed, and no one will invest there. Why would you invest in a country where the population is declining? So it comes down to simple things like that. But we will see patterns of mobility that we've never seen in all of history. 130,000 years of human migration, and we've never seen certain patterns that are already accelerating today. This is not futurism, this is today's data, right? The number of Asian populations in Europe, you can see it right here in Interlaken. The first time I was backpacking here, I was a 17-year-old American kid, like all the other 17-year-old American kids who were backpacking here. Today, half the backpackers, 90% are from India and China, right? Exactly 30 years later. You see it yourself. So, Asian populations in Western Europe, it's the reverse Silk Roads, right? And moving north as well, and even colonizing, you might say, the former Soviet republics. These kinds of movements, Africans, of course, crossing the Mediterranean, Arabs moving in all directions. Some of these vectors, dyads of mobility, we have never, ever seen before, and they're accelerating and accelerating and accelerating. These are just some of the consequences of taking a complex systems approach and bringing it all together. I see a number of scenarios for where the future could go. And the thing is about scenario planning is that all of these scenarios are true right now, at the same time, all over the world. It isn't about, well, will we collectively move towards a scenario of barbarism and neo-medievalism and competition for resources and lack of sustainability, uncontrolled mass migration? Or will we collectively steer humanity towards what I call the northern lights of sustainability, circulation of people, integration, harmony? We're seeing all of those things at the same time. There's places like Canada that are attracting lots of people and peacefully integrating them. And then there's situations like we have in the Mediterranean Sea or the US-Mexico border, all at the same time. And so I arm you with these scenarios so that you can decide, well, where are you going to take your place, your country, your region, right? What influence can you have? What direction do you want to go? Because other places will go in different directions, right, all at the same time. And so I leave you with this final thought. As a geographer, it all comes down to what you can actually put all of this on a map. You can put all these trends on a map. The trends of where the resources are, where the people are, where the borders are, where the industry is, and realize that it's constantly changing. You cannot take any map for granted. There is no static map. And the future map is going to look very different from the past map. But there's things that you can do as leaders, business leaders in particular. I challenge you, I commend to you to think about what positive impact you can have. And you can do one of two things. You can be involved in moving people to where there are resources, where there's a need for their labor, for their skills, or you can be involved in moving technologies to where the people are, where there's a demand, where there are markets. You can do one of those things, move people to resources, move technologies to people. And if you do those things, and as you do those things, you're building what is going to be a much different map of the future than what we've had in the past. And as I said, that is the nature of complexity itself. The future is going to look very different. It's going to look a lot more like this than the maps that hang in your offices and in your classrooms. Be prepared for that, but also be a builder. Build that better map of the future. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Deutsch, Englisch? Machen wir Deutsch, oder?
Sehr gerne.
Herr Khanna, das war sehr eindrücklich. Ich frage mich aber trotzdem, Sie sagen, diese großen Immigrationsströme, die werden auf jeden Fall kommen. Aber die Gesellschaften der Westen, USA, Europa, Schweiz auch, die sind ja gar nicht bereit für diese massiven Ströme. Und es wird zu gesellschaftlichen Spannungen führen. Müssen wir uns besser vorbereiten? Müssen wir diese neue Realität besser akzeptieren?
Also dieses Bedenken gegenüber Bereitschaft, das muss man über eine gewisse Zeitandauer schauen. Also über die Jahrhunderte, in dem diese Migrationsströmungen schon sich beschleunigt haben, ergänzt haben, vergrößert haben, haben wir natürlich erfahren, dass westliche Gesellschaften, vor allem englischsprachige, also USA, Kanada, Großbritannien, im Laufe der vergangenen 200-300 Jahren mehrere 100 Millionen neue Migranten aufgenommen haben. Das heißt, wir können das. Nicht im Angela Merkel Sinne von wir schaffen es. Das hat sich natürlich nicht so ergeben.
Nicht bewährt, ne?
Aber jetzt, heute natürlich gibt es Spannungen, das merken wir natürlich, wenn wir die westliche Politik anschauen. Aber ich schaue in der Regel nicht so genau, also nicht so sehr auf die einzelnen Politiker und ihre Aussagen gegenüber Migration. Ich schaue auf die Zahlen. Und jedes Jahr haben wir immer mehr. Es sei egal, ob Meloni Premierministerin ist, egal, ob Brexit stattgefunden ist oder nicht, egal, ob Trump Präsident gewesen ist oder wiedergewählt wird, es kommen immer mehr. Also es gibt die Aussagen von Politikern und dann gibt es die tagtäglich die faktische Statistiken.
Aber kann man diese Aussagen von Politikern, kann man die dann überhaupt ignorieren? Die größte Partei in der Schweiz sagt, die Schweiz ist voll. Ja. Wir sehen jetzt zum Beispiel bei den Europawahlen, dass es wahrscheinlich auch einen leichten Rechtsruck geben wird. Das ist ja eine Reflexion von den Wählern. Die kann man doch nicht ignorieren, oder?
Kann man nicht ignorieren, aber es gibt auch sogar ein mächtiges Prinzip. Ich werde nicht sagen wichtiger, weil in der Schweiz gibt es natürlich nichts Wichtigeres als die Demokratie und die Aussagen des Volks. Aber andererseits gibt es das mächtige Prinzip von Angebot und Nachfrage. Und letzten Endes bestimmt die Zukunft dieses Prinzip von Angebot und Nachfrage. Es darf natürlich Politiker geben, die diese Behauptung machen, die Schweiz sei voll und so weiter. Das hört man auch in den USA, obwohl es natürlich ein viel größeres Land ist. Aber in der Wirklichkeit gibt es diesen Bedarf nach Menschen, nach Steuerzahler, Einwohner und so weiter. Und das bestimmt letzten Endes das Faktum sozusagen auf dem Boden.
Das heißt aber, das Messaging, das muss ein bisschen positiver werden, oder? Wenn es um Immigration geht. Immigration, kann das ein Wachstumstreiber sein? In der Schweiz ist es das teilweise schon, in den USA. Es hält auch in den USA die Inflation tiefer, als sie eigentlich wäre.
Aber nicht nur das, treibt auch den Wachstum weiter. Also das haben wir jetzt, also natürlich ist es sehr kontrovers in den USA, aber es gab einen Konsens über eine gewisse bestimmte Statistik vor einem Monat, wo dann erkündigt wurde, dass in 2033 sind die USA schneller angewachsen als andere und es liegt in der Tat die Migration zugrunde. Also die hohe Migrationszahlen der letzten paar Jahre in den USA haben auf jeden Fall zum schnellen Wirtschaftswachstum beigetragen.
Herr Khanna, woher kommt Ihr sauberes Deutsch? Ist das vom Rundreisen in Interlaken vor 25 Jahren?
Austauschschüler gewesen.
Aus der Schule,
Mitte
wow.
90er Jahre, ja.
Okay, wunderbar. Eindrücklich. Herr Khanna, vielen herzlichen Dank.
Danke sehr.